Senator Joe Manchin fast becoming the pariah of the Democratic Party. His opposition to ending the filibuster means on every issue, if Manchin is not on board with his party's agenda, the issue dies. So tomorrow, the Poor People's Campaign will be marching in Senator Manchin's home state of West Virginia to protest his decision to oppose voting rights legislation and the efforts to save the Senate filibuster. The march is a direct response to Manchin's op-ed published 1 week ago in the Charleston Gazette-Mail, openly stating that he'd vote against the sweeping For the People Act to protect voting. Poor People's Campaign co-chair, the Reverend Dr. William Barber, says Senator Manchin's most recent policy decisions hurt, quote, poor and low-class people, and is calling for people of all colors and creeds to join him in the moral march on Manchin. Joining me now is Reverend Dr. William Barber, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend, good to see you, sir. I want you to tell me about what effect you believe this march will have on Manchin, because he's met with a lot of faith leaders and a lot of representatives of people of color in this country, and he seems unmoved by the argument at the moment.
Well, he has, but he also hasn't faced street heat from his own people. And this kind of demonstration, you know, we were called by poor and low-wealth white people and black people and minors and veterans to come. They are tired of people talking about West Virginia and allowing him to say he's doing this because of West Virginians. 79% of likely voters in West Virginia want expansion of the Voting Rights Act. They want the vision of the For the People's Act. In fact, West Virginians, there's 700,000 poor and low-wealth West Virginians, 350,000 make less than $15 an hour. He's been wrong many times. They want living wages. They want health care. He's hurting the very block of people that put him in office, poor and low-wage white people from the mountains and black people from Charleston, and they are ready to speak out. And not only going to do it in West Virginia, they're then taking buses on the 23rd and coming to Washington, D.C., and they're going to be with us on June 21st for a mass Poor People's Assembly, Low-Wage Workers Assembly, and moral march on Washington as we get ready for an in-person march launching that for June of next year. So people are very, very, very bothered. You know, Ali, one of them said to me, there's a dead cat on the line somewhere. This doesn't make sense to them. They say Manchin doesn't believe in bipartisan because he says he would never vote against the filibuster. That means even if he had 50 Democrats and 9 Republicans, he's more committed to the filibuster. Even if they could pass a bill to stop unconstitutional actions in state, he says he's against ending the filibuster. There's a dead cat on the line somewhere. Who has their thumb on him? Who's pushing him? And people in West Virginia are sick of it, and they want to speak out.
Well, you tweeted the other day, Manchin's policies hurt poor and low-wealth people. He's against $15 an hour living wages and expanding voting rights. He's supported by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and has abandoned the poor and low-wealth people of his own state and the nation, and they're tired of it. I think Manchin at one point, I love talking about economics and wages with you. Manchin at one point has said that he'd support an $11 minimum wage. West Virginia is not the country's most prosperous state. I imagine there are a whole lot of people there who you are probably in better contact with than I am, who would appreciate an increase in the minimum wage.
You listen, let people tune in to tomorrow. The fact of the matter is, when I met with him with 12 West Virginians in February, they really lit into him and said, we don't need 11, we need 15 now. In fact, we need more than that. This state needs infrastructure, it needs living wages, it needs health care. There's something really wrong here, as I said, because he's standing against the very thing his people need. And one of the things we're going to say is that this battle over voting rights has to, first of all, it can't just be about race. It's got to talk about how it hurts black people, brown people, poor people, disabled people, women, children, young people. But we also have to connect it to policies. When you suppress the vote, you suppress electing people who will, in fact, support living wages and support health care and support infrastructure. There's something really wrong with his positions because they don't make any sense. He says we need to wait. He says that they need time. Legislators need time. Well, McConnell had 8 years, Alex, 8 years, Alcia, 8 years to fix the Voting Rights Act. McConnell has said he's never going to support living wages. He's never going to support the kind of real infrastructure plan we need that will reach down to poor and low-wealth communities. So how much more time do we need? the cat on the line somewhere, and the people want to speak out about it in West Virginia.
We're going to find this dead cat. But Manchin was a state representative. He was a congressman. He was a very popular governor of West Virginia. He's been the senator from West Virginia. But in his last election, he won by a a much narrower margin than ever before. What do you say to the argument that somebody put out the other day that it's not like Democrats are going to get somebody left of Joe Manchin elected in West Virginia?
Well, we don't know that because, first of all, if you look at the numbers, there are a lot of people that have stayed home. In many states, we did a survey where poor and low-wealth people have not voted because they don't ever hear anybody talking about them. But if you flip that over, who got him in office this time and who's going to make the difference next time? It's going to be poor and low-wealth, white people from the mountains and black people from the city. So I think we need to stop suggesting what might be and start talking about what will make the most people come out to vote. And what will make them vote is when they know they elect people that support the things that support their daily lives, like living wages and health care. Another thing you should know about Manchin, though, he got the governor that's sitting now to run as a Democrat. And then once he got elected as a Democrat, he flipped not just to a Republican, but to a Trump Republican. There's a dead cat on the line somewhere here. And the people in West Virginia want to call it out. They want to speak in West Virginia, and then they want to lead a gathering in D.C. because this just makes no sense. The man is voting not only against America, not only against democracy, but against his own state and the people who have supported him the most.
Reverend Dr. William Barber, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for making time for us this morning. Dr. Barber is the chairman of the Poor People's Campaign.